oh boy. This is awkward. Hello my love, welcome to the van, or should I say, bienvenue en France. We made it, we are living in the van. However, this is not the video that I really want to be making, if I'm totally honest with you. Because in this video, I'm catching you up on what went down on the week leading up to us moving out of our house into our van and leaving the UK for good. It was a really stressful, trying and overwhelming time, and if I'm being truthful, the last thing that I really wanted to do was edit all that footage and relive it. However, I am here to document the reality of pursuing and living the dream life, and this was part of it. It was a really bumpy ride. So, my love, buckle up and join me for the countdown to van life. Let's roll the footage and let me share with you what really went down. The house was in a complete state of chaos, half packed for storage, half the contents of the van in the house making space, and instead of sorting it all out, I was at a driving intensive all day so I could be ready for my test later in the week. Only 1 week until we were to call this van our tiny home for the next year, and as you can see, definitely not done. I always knew Kayvan would be working down to the wire on this project because that's just how he is, but there was way more to do to get this van fully converted than I'd even been expecting at this point, which meant all the packing was on me. On this day, I had a couple of client calls and then, yep, even more packing, and just 6 days until we needed to be out of our rented house, suddenly the guy who we were meant to be renting a storage container from started ghosting us. On top of this, we still hadn't figured out what the heck to do with my car. Our original plan had been that we'd buy Payson Island, stow all our belongings there, and since that hadn't worked out, we found ourselves with a ton of logistical problems to solve. Did I mention we were also waiting on the arrival of some crucial components for the van, like the shower door, for example? Kayvan was working longer and longer hours on the van, the house was half packed, half our belongings were about to go into climate-controlled storage, the other half still with nowhere to go, as the guy continued to avoid my calls and texts, but rather than being at home and getting done, I spent several hours at my driving test. The upside was that I wasn't home when the removals people showed up with our storage pods, so I didn't have to help. Fortunately, progress was being made on the van, and we had a toilet in the bathroom cubicle, but still no sign of that missing bathroom door. Kayvan was working around the clock, but his hard work was paying off. Most of the internal cladding was in, as were the roof fan lights, but there was still so much to do. I was just trying my best to focus on whatever task was in front of me, but the overwhelm was seriously beginning to creep in. Just 3 days out, and Kayvan was working even later, looking more knackered by the day. His friend Chris was a godsend, helping out with the internal paneling and installing the solar panel on the roof, jobs that really couldn't be done solo. Meanwhile, I took the occasional break and did my best to ignore the chaos around me. Anything to try to keep the packing-induced hysteria at bay. Although, let's be honest, it did sometimes get to me. Life had become increasingly like camping at our house, and Kayvan and I had what could only be laughingly described as a date night with a takeaway curry. Side note, the heart patch on his knee is what happens when you ask your daughter to practice her sewing skills by repairing your jeans. Still no sign of our shower door, and after a confusing message from the container guy, it was obvious that I was going to need a different solution, and so I spent several hours trying to come up with an alternative solution for the remainder of our things. The car situation, meanwhile, was still unsolved, had nowhere to put the thing, and I busied myself listing a load of our things for free online to get rid of them. On this day, I worked from this makeshift situation in my office and didn't really film much else. But the shower door did arrive, thank goodness, and one of my friends came up trumps and said she would borrow my car for the day. Phew. Our last day in the house, and having managed to secure a storage container, the removal guys showed up and took the remainder of our belongings, while Kayvan, well, in a bid to get the van done, had worked through the night and just kept going. This man has a work ethic that astounds me, but the day began to unravel really quickly. Things went wrong on the van, the cleaning, chores and admin seemed endless, and as the day gave way into evening, I had to call it. It was simply too much. I was beyond overwhelmed, and Kayvan looked broken. I made the decision that we'd have to stay the night. Okay, this is awkward. We were supposed to be out of the house, and we weren't. We were still there. We didn't have any arrangement or agreement to be there, and yet there we were. I'm going to fill you in on what happened on the day after what should have been our final day in our rented house. I didn't really film anything on that day because it was so stressful. The last thing I wanted to do was whip out my camera, and I literally didn't even have time to think about it. So I'm going to fill you in, and then you can join me in our first night in the van. So we stayed at the house an extra night, a night that we weren't really entitled to stay there. And we woke up, Kayvan felt like sort of a new man because he had at least slept, and we just got up and cracked back on. Him still working on completing the van with no more time really to spare, just working like a crazy man trying to get things done. Invariably over the last couple of days leading up to this, and even more so on this day, as fatigue set in and the stress of everything, things kept going wrong, tools broke, parts went missing, things didn't arrive. It was just mayhem in and around the van. I continued to try to decipher what was coming in the van, even though I couldn't actually pack it because he was all in the way and stuff. And I continued trying to clean the house from top to bottom, all whilst, you know, trying to entertain my child because she's on summer holidays. It's funny because maybe that doesn't sound that bad. Him working on the van, I just had to pack some stuff and clean the house. What was the big deal? What took so long? And when I look back, I kind of am like, ugh, it's really hard to describe. It was just the most overwhelmed I've probably been in my life, being frank. But let's be clear, that was by design. I don't know if you watched my video a few weeks or months ago when I said that I wasn't going to meticulously project plan our preparations for van life. I was going to enjoy my last few weeks living in our hometown, seeing my best friend, my mum, you know, lots of important people to me, doing the kinds of things that we enjoyed doing so that we could leave feeling like we'd made the most of that time. By the way, if there's some background noise, I don't know if you can hear that. It's because we're at a kind of camping spot. I'll share more of that next week. So it was by design and by choice. I knew it was going to be a real crunch at the end, but I did not know, and I was not prepared that it would be so much. And it's actually kind of hard to describe, partly because I think my brain has just shut down that last couple of days and doesn't want to relive it. I found it really hard editing this footage because I was like, oh, I don't want to go back there. But I do think it's important to share it. And even through the overwhelm, even through the stress, there was still that part of me that was so firmly believing in what we're doing, so excited and impatient to be embarking on this adventure. So while it was a huge undertaking, I knew that it couldn't last forever, although at times it did feel like it might. And I knew that we were just so close to the finish line and to immersing ourselves in that next level dream lifestyle that we've been wanting to create, of being on this family gap year, traveling around and having all these freedoms. But boy, oh boy, was there a lot to do. It was just a huge mountain of tasks. So somehow we got it all done, still way later than we planned. So well into the evening of this extra day in our rental property that wasn't planned for. And we drove away in the van into the night. We didn't go far for our first night because it was so late. We just drove to the cliff top overlooking the sea, but we were shrouded in sea fog. It felt very dramatic of a departure and like kind of slightly eerie, but also very exciting. Parked up on the cliff top. We had to take my car with me because even though I finally had a solution for it, we hadn't been able to give it over to my friend yet because there were some things that needed to be done. We drove in convoy, parked up, and I got into the van and we poured ourselves a glass of, now you might remember this from the van life prep video that I did about food and cooking on the road. Remember that bottle of organic Sicilian limoncello that I was joking about, that like that's clearly not essential? Yeah, we brought it with us. It was in the fridge. It seemed wrong to throw it out. So we had a glass of limoncello and toasted ourselves for finally achieving it, finally wrapping things up at the house and being almost done. More of that in a second. A celebratory limoncello for you.
Thank you, madam.
Celebratory limoncello for me. Cheers, we made it. With a pillow of shoes. You're relaxing. Ding. And it just felt really great. So it would be lovely now to describe to you the next day, which would have been the first proper day of van life. Enjoying our freedom, spending a leisurely day, unwinding after all the stresses and strains of getting to that point. Alas, no. We had still so many chores to wrap up, and so we did go in the morning down into the sea, had a refreshing dip, and that felt really good. That felt like a proper van life moment. Wandered back up to the van, had some breakfast, but then we had to crack on with jobs. We had to take my car, have the brake light fixed, because of course that went out in the middle of all of this. I got it fully valeted so that I could take it over to my friend, transfer ownership. Meanwhile, Kayvan was taking his trailer because he'd found a friend who would look after it, and I think one of his motorbikes went over there as well. We had to do a final tip run, so even though we'd vacated the property, we'd left some rubbish that we couldn't fit anywhere and couldn't do anything with. Went back, collected that, took it to the tip. Just more admin and things that we had to figure out. We had to get our international driving permit sorted. We needed photos for those. There was just this, like, we kind of felt like, are we ever going to be done and free from all of this? It was kind of one of those days. However, we finished up those jobs just in time to go and get fish and chips from our favorite place and take them to the cliff top, and the sun was setting and the sky was pink and beautiful, and we ate our fish and chips, and it was admittedly slightly chilly being the UK in August, but it just felt really good. And then finally we headed out of town, eyes set on the horizon, breathing a collective sigh of relief. So rather than feeling emotional at our departure, we actually just felt a bit spent, and also at the same time really relieved to have found ourselves at the bottom of this never-ending seemingly to-do list. So yeah, it wasn't as emotional as I was anticipating at all, because I just think I didn't have anything left in me to be emotional, and that hasn't really kicked in yet. So we've left the UK for good. Yes, we're traveling for at least 9 months, maybe up to a year, but after that we're going to be relocating to the Republic of Ireland. So that's it for us. Obviously we'll go back and visit, but it just felt like such an effort to wind things down and to get out that we just felt relieved. And yeah, there's been no emotional realization or anything yet. Maybe that will come in time. I don't know. I'm sure at some point I'll start really missing people, but for now we've just actually been enjoying unwinding and settling into van life. In the next video, join me because I finally get to share van life with you. Yay! I'm so excited. I cannot wait to bring you behind the scenes of what it's like living in the van and where we've been in our first week of van life. So I'm going to get you all caught up, and you can join us on this adventure that we've been planning for 2 years, dreaming about for even longer. That is finally here. I get goosebumps even just saying it. Hasn't fully connected for me yet. It kind of still gives me that pinch me feeling that, oh my god, we're doing this, we're really doing this, we're really living this lifestyle that we've been wanting to live for so long. So exciting. So I cannot wait to bring you in on that with us as the dream life starts to become just regular life for us. Until next time, my love, go live your dream life. Bye for now.